The little boy, no older than 8, adjusted the collar of his stiff, formal blazer, a tiny motion almost invisible in the cavernous courtroom. To the judge, the lawyers, and the reporters, it was just a restless child's fidget. But in the third row, a former tomb guard named Anya Sharma felt her breath catch in her throat. Her mind, trained to find meaning in the smallest deviations from the norm, saw it for what it was, a desperate, silent scream, a universal signal for help. But what could she do? Before I tell you what that signal meant, and the earth-shattering confrontation that followed, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The air inside the Philadelphia Federal Courthouse was heavy and cold, tasting of old paper and polished mahogany. The room was designed to diminish the individual, with towering, book-matched mahogany panels that drank the light and ceilings so high they seemed to gather shadows. For Anya Sharma, however, the oppressive quiet was a familiar language. She had spent the better part of a decade learning its every dialect at Arlington National Cemetery, as one of the few women to ever serve as a sentinel at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Her life had been a metronome of precision. 21 steps, turn, face the tomb for 21 seconds, turn again. She remembered standing her post through a blizzard so fierce that ice crystallized on her eyelashes, each blink a tiny, cracking sound only she could hear. She remembered a summer day, so hot the humid air felt solid in her lungs. Yet her expression remained a mask of impassive dedication. This training did more than build discipline. It had rewired her senses, turning them into analytical instruments. She didn't just see, she observed. She didn't just hear, she dissected silence. It was this skill that had brought her here today as a quiet favor to an old friend, Detective Mallory Ross, who worked for Child Protective Services. Mallory's text had been simple. Got a bad feeling on a custody hearing wrapped inside a financial fraud case. Need your eyes. Courtroom 3. And so, Anya sat, her back perfectly straight, a habit forged by years in uniform, and she observed the Kane family. At the defendant's table sat Richard Kane, the man on trial for fraud. He was the picture of curated success, from his bespoke navy suit to the subtle glint of a Patek Philippe watch at his wrist. When he spoke to his lawyer, his voice was a low, confident murmur, a sound engineered to command rooms. Beside him, his wife, Diane, was an elegant statue of anxiety, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. But it was the boy between them who held Anya's focus. His name was Leo. He was dressed in a charcoal gray blazer, buttoned to the top, that looked more like a cage than clothing. His blonde hair was perfectly combed, but his face was unnaturally still. Children in boring situations fidget, they yawn, they look around. Leo did none of that. He sat rigid, his shoulders curled inward as if trying to make himself smaller. His gaze was fixed on the floor, deliberately avoiding any contact with the man beside him. Anya saw the subtle, constant tension in his posture. When Richard Kane shifted in his chair, a barely perceptible tremor ran through the boy's frame. Anya's instincts, honed by 10 years of watching for the slightest threat in a place of sacred silence, began to scream. This wasn't the stillness of a well-behaved child. This was the stillness of prey. Then it happened. Kane was leaning over, whispering something to his attorney, when Leo's right hand came up in a gesture that looked, to anyone else, like he was simply adjusting his too tight collar. But he wasn't. For a fraction of a second, his thumb tucked into his palm, and his 4 fingers closed over it. It was smooth, deliberate, and gone in an instant. Anya's blood ran cold. The world around her seemed to slow down. The judge's droning voice, the rustle of papers, the distant city traffic, it all faded into a dull roar. In the crushing silence of her focus, all she could see was that tiny hand, forming a signal she had learned in a joint forces hostage survival course years ago. The international sign for distress. A silent plea that meant only one thing. I am in danger, and I cannot speak. Anya's mind, usually a fortress of calm, became a battlefield. Did I really see that? The question echoed against the walls of her training. For a decade, A single misstep, a fractional error in her count, would have been a betrayal of her duty. False certainty was a luxury she had never been afforded. To stand up in a federal courtroom, to interrupt a trial based on a gesture that lasted less than a second. It was insane. The consequences were immediate and severe. Contempt of court, public humiliation, the destruction of the quiet life she had so carefully built after leaving the service. She could ruin everything. Her, a security consultant, accusing a man like Richard Kane, a man whose wealth could buy armies of lawyers who would tear her apart on the stand, painting her as a delusional, attention-seeking veteran. She could lose her job, her credibility, everything. Yet the image of that small hand was burned into her mind. It was precise. It was intentional. The training that screamed caution also screamed certainty. She knew what she had seen. Her gaze drifted back to Leo. He hadn't moved, but she could now see the faint, rapid pulse beating in his neck. He was terrified. Anya quietly pulled out her phone, keeping it below the bench in front of her. She sent a single, coded text to Mallory, who she knew was standing by the courtroom's rear doors. Signal 5 observed. Confident. Signal 5 was their shorthand for a confirmed visual on a nonverbal distress call. Seconds later, she saw Mallory slip inside, her expression grim. The detective moved with practiced ease along the back wall, crouching beside Anya's seat. "You sure?" Mallory whispered, her voice barely a breath. 100%, Anya replied, her eyes never leaving the boy. His posture, his breathing, it all fits. This kid is a prisoner. Richard Kane was on the witness stand now, his voice weaving a tapestry of confidence and wounded pride for the jury. He spoke of business ethics and family values, his tone smooth as polished marble. As he said the word discipline, Anya saw Leo flinch. It was a microscopic movement, a tightening of the shoulders, but it was there. Kane's hand, the one with the ostentatious watch, rested on the back of Leo's chair. It looked casual, paternal, but Anya saw the pressure of his fingertips, a subtle assertion of control. That was when Leo did it again. His eyes, for a single, desperate moment, lifted from the floor and scanned the gallery. They were wide with a terror, so profound it felt like a physical blow. For a split second, his gaze met Anya's. In that instant, he saw not a stranger, but a woman whose entire posture radiated an immovable, absolute attention. He saw that he was seen. His hand came up to his collar again, and this time the signal was slower, more deliberate. Thumb in, fingers over. "Help me." That look, that silent, soul-deep plea, shattered Anya's remaining reservations. The risk no longer mattered. Her duty was no longer to a tomb of stone, but to a living, breathing child. The courtroom, the judge, Richard Kane, they all became secondary. With the fluid, deliberate motion of a sentinel assuming her post, Anya Sharma stood up. The soft scuff of her shoes on the floor sounded like a cannon blast in the quiet room. Her voice, when it came, was not loud, but it cut through the air with the clarity of a bell, calm and impossible to ignore. "Your Honor." The courtroom froze. Judge Green, a man in his late 60s with a face accustomed to absolute authority, looked up from his papers, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "Ma'am, you're not recognized by this court. Sit down immediately, or I will have you removed for contempt." But Anya didn't move. She stood her ground, her posture as unyielding as the marble she once guarded. "Your Honor," she said, her voice gaining strength, "I apologize for the interruption, but that child," she pointed a steady hand toward the defense table, "has just given the international distress signal. Twice. He is in danger, and he is asking for help." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Kane's lawyer shot to her feet. "Objection. This is an outrageous and unsubstantiated accusation. This woman is disrupting a federal proceeding." Richard Kane himself turned slowly, a mask of cold fury replacing his charming facade. "This is absurd," he spat. "I demand she be removed." Diane, his wife, gripped Leo's shoulder, her knuckles turning white. The boy winced, a flicker of pain crossing his face that only Anya saw. "Look at his left sleeve," Anya said, her voice ringing with conviction. "Ask him to pull it up." Judge Green slammed his gavel. "Bailiff, remove this woman now." But as the bailiff started to move, a voice came from the jury box. Juror number 7, a middle-aged schoolteacher, leaned forward. "Your Honor," she said hesitantly, I saw it too. His hand. I thought it was just a nervous habit, but he did it twice." The judge paused, his gavel hovering. The bailiff stopped. The seed of doubt had been planted. "Sir," Anya said, her voice now softer, more direct, speaking to the judge. "If we ignore him now, we all fail him." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Judge Green let out a long breath. "This court is in recess," he declared, his voice heavy. "The child, Mr. and Mrs. Kane, and Detective Ross will join me in my chambers." Immediately. The chambers were a stark contrast to the courtroom. Smaller, quieter, but the tension was 1,000 times thicker. Leo sat on the edge of a large leather chair, looking smaller than ever. Kane and his wife stood over him, a wall of intimidation. "This is a violation of our parental rights," Kane began, his voice dripping with menace. "Mr. Kane," the judge said sternly, "you will wait outside." After a moment of heated protest, they were gone. The room exhaled. Mallory knelt in front of Leo, her voice incredibly soft. "Hey, Leo. My name is Mallory. You're not in any trouble. That woman who stood up? She's a friend. She's trained to see things other people miss. She saw you." Leo's eyes filled with tears, but he remained silent. Mallory gestured to a small stuffed lion she had brought with her. "This is Leon. He's very brave. Can he sit with you?" The boy gave a tiny nod. Mallory gently touched his arm. "Leo, can I see your arm, sweetheart?" The one Anya mentioned. Hesitantly, Leo pulled back the sleeve of his charcoal gray blazer and the starched white shirt beneath it. The skin of his forearm was a roadmap of faded yellow and angry purple bruises, some shaped like fingerprints. It was a silent testament to a long and terrible story. Just then, a bailiff knocked and entered, handing Mallory a tablet. "Per your emergency request, Detective, we've pulled the recent message logs from Mr. Kane's phone." Mallory scrolled through them, her face hardening. She turned the screen to the judge. The messages were chillingly clear. Threats to his wife about Leo's disobedience, punishments described as lessons, a clear pattern of calculated cruelty disguised as discipline. Judge Green read them, his expression turning to stone. He looked from a screen to the bruises on the boy's arm, and then to the door behind, which Richard Kane was waiting. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and cold as steel. "Based on this evidence, I am authorizing immediate emergency protective custody for this child." Outside, Kane's voice could be heard, rising in rage. "You can't do this. He is my son." But inside the chambers, Leo had leaned into Mallory, whispering the first words he had spoken all day. "I don't want to go back." "You won't," Mallory promised, her arm around him. "The fight is just beginning, but you will never go back." The moment Richard Kane posted bail, he weaponized his fortune. An army of lawyers and a high-priced public relations firm launched a full-scale assault. Suddenly, Anya Sharma was no longer a concerned citizen. She was a meddling, unstable veteran with a history of overstepping. News segments debated the validity of a secret signal, while online articles, seeded by Kane's team, questioned her military record. The narrative they spun was clever. Kane was a strict but loving father, and this was a tragic misunderstanding manipulated by a broken system. In the CPS office, the pressure was immense. "They're filing motions to have the evidence thrown out," Mallory told Anya, gesturing to a mountain of legal documents. "They claim the phone records were obtained improperly and that Leo's bruises are from normal boyhood roughhousing. Without a direct statement from him, they might be able to create enough doubt." The thought of putting Leo through a formal interview was agonizing. He had just begun to feel safe. But they all knew Kane's lawyers would paint his silence as proof that nothing was wrong. Anya found him in a small, sunlit playroom, quietly building a tower of blocks. She sat on the floor near him, not speaking at first. "They need you to be brave one more time, Leo," she said softly after a while. He looked at her, his eyes wide. They said you were a guard, he whispered. Yes, Anya said. I guarded some very important soldiers. Were you brave? He asked. I try to be, she said. But guarding isn't about not being scared. It's about standing your post, even when you are. It's about protecting what matters. Right now, your words, they're the post. And you're the one who has to guard them. He seemed to understand. A few days later, in a room designed to feel safe and calm, Leo told his story to a forensic interviewer. Anya watched from behind one-way glass, her hands clasped behind her back in the familiar parade rest stance. Leo's voice was small but steady as he spoke of being locked in his room, of the rules that changed without warning, and of the fear that was a constant presence in his home. His recorded testimony became the prosecution's unshakable foundation. The final day in court was electric. The room was packed. When the prosecution played the video of Leo's interview, a profound silence fell. On the large screen, a small boy hugging a stuffed lion spoke his simple, devastating truth. He told me no one would ever believe me. Leo's voice echoed. Anya watched the jury. She saw a man clench his jaw, his eyes fixed on Cain. She saw the schoolteacher from before quietly wipe away a tear. The defense's arguments about discipline and misinterpretation now sounded hollow and obscene. When the jury filed out, the wait was agonizing. When they returned an hour later, the verdict was a formality. The foreman stood, cleared his throat, and declared Richard Cain guilty on all counts. A collective gasp of relief went through the gallery. Cain sat motionless, his mask of civility finally shattered, revealing the cold, empty void beneath. At the back of the courtroom, Anya closed her eyes for a moment, not in celebration, but in quiet acknowledgement. The silence had been broken. The post had been held. A week later, she visited Leo one last time before he went to live with his new foster family. He ran to her and gave her a drawing. It was a crayon picture of a tall woman in a uniform standing beside a small boy. Below it, he had written one word, guard. This story isn't just about a signal. It's a powerful reminder that the most important battles are often fought for those who cannot speak for themselves. True courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to see another's pain and choose to make it your own, even for a moment. It's about breaking the silence. Have you ever been in a situation where your gut told you something was deeply wrong, but you hesitated to act? What would you have done if you were in Anya's shoes, watching from the gallery? And do you believe that a single person's courage can truly stand up against the power of wealth and influence in our world? If this story about courage and conviction moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Share this video with someone who always seems to notice the little things that others miss. We read and value every single comment you leave. More stories about hidden heroes and unexpected justice are waiting for you right on your screen. Click to watch the next one, and we'll see you tomorrow with a gripping story about a firefighter who had to make an impossible choice in the heart of a blazing inferno.